And we are live. Welcome to Transform Your Relationships. I'm Laura Rubinstein with the amazing Dr. Rhoberta Shaler. Hi, Rhoberta.
Hi, Laura. We've got a good one today because it's
Juicy.
something that everybody has to have in their vocabulary, in their emotional vocabulary. So it'll be fun to have a talk about it.
Yeah, and I'm guessing most of us have had that experience of having the rug pulled out from under us, and to me, it's so shocking. So shocking. So how do we recover? That's really what we're talking about today. Some steps to take, some support to have, to know you're not alone, and to heal together, really.
And you might be alone.
And how can you help yourself?
It happens. Um, and also, let's just talk for a minute before we get to steps. Let's just talk about what we're talking about, which is being blindsided by somebody else's decision that you had no party to making, and they announce it. And then it's completely taken you by surprise. So, and it may have an effect on your life. It may be impacting your daily life or your thoughts about yourself or your
Huge.
thoughts about what you believed, or maybe even it's a relationship issue and the other person just up and disappears.
Yeah.
I mean, and you didn't have any input. So when we're talking about taking the rug out from under you, we're talking about you didn't have any input into what just happened.
Right. And if I had a heart button to send hearts out to you all, if that's happened to you, I'm sending hearts because I
Oh,
know
me too.
it's like it's so cutting. It's so harsh. So I have an example. I mean, from my early life, the first time I experienced it, and the first time is really painful, especially if it's something like this. Your parents tell you they're getting divorced. You had no clue. I had
Right.
no clue. They were kissing just a month before, and they never argued. This is my parents, and then they get divorced. I'm like, then they're saying I had no input. And it affected my life 100%. And so that's where my resiliency skills started. And so I really can speak to this. Not sure I have all the answers. It doesn't make it, you know, not painful. It's going to be painful. And the thing is that we can learn from this. We can grow from it. We can, and your words for what might this be good is, kind of, I remember getting to a place eventually, probably just 3 months later, and I was in pain, but I said, I remember thinking, I'm really glad it was me and not my best friends.
Ah,
And I remember thinking that, like, I was handling it, I was doing it, and I wasn't sure. I was still in pain, but I was like pretty starting to see that I had some skills, or I was developing some skills around this, that I could still live and thrive even though I'm hurting, you know? And I wasn't so sure other people would, and maybe that was just a way of comforting myself and not necessarily the truth, but at 14 years old, that was my logic.
well, you were strengthening yourself. You were affirming that I am strong. I am. And even if you had to do it by comparison with somebody else who might not be able to do it, it was still a coping mechanism that could really work for you. And sometimes that's very difficult to get to that place when something blindsides you because you take such an emotional hit that you go down and then you don't know how to get up. You feel like I am immobilized, I'm paralyzed, I'm knocked down, and where do I find the first thing that will help me pull myself out of this? And the first thing is, first of all, to notice that you're still alive. Right.
You survived. You
Yes.
didn't like melt like the Wicked Witch. I'm
Yeah.
melting.
But it's a big deal, isn't it? I mean, to
It's
realize,
huge,
like, I didn't die. I mean, this horrible thing happened and I didn't die.
right?
I don't like it. So, okay. I think that what we tend to do is we take an emotional hit and it colors our whole life. And then as we come back, we've got to say, I'm going to look at this corner because it isn't your whole life and it feels like your whole life. So then you have to come out and say, but, well, let's say, well, let's use your example. Well, I've got friends at school. I'm doing well at school. I'm on track to go to the college that I want to. I have the clothes that I want. I don't think I'm going to starve,
Right.
You
I have
start,
other people in my life who love me and who are stable, and and there are people I can call. I start making lists, I start making
exactly
evidence for
empowering.
the the good things in life, right?
Yeah, empowering yourself to say, just a minute, I'm in charge of what's going on in my head. My heart may be a little muddled right now. My stomach may be in knots and doing double flips, but I'm in charge of what's in my head. So there are all these things that are good, and this one is really nasty, awful, sideways. And it wants to seep in and take over the whole picture, but I'm in charge of the picture. So I will say, let me put this in its place. Yes, it's big. Yes, it's an impact. Yes, it's a big hit. But, as soon as there's a hit, the body moves to heal. So let me remember that. Yes, I'm experiencing the hit, and the body will move to heal. If
Mm.
I start focusing on what's good in my life, like you said, what I say all the time, if you can catch that little moment between something happening and you going down into the rabbit hole, if you can just catch it and say, before I start in the ain't it awful and he done me wrongs, I can say, for what might this be good? I turn myself around in that moment. My focus is different. I am empowered. If I can say, okay, well, you know, they didn't seem to be fighting, but apparently something pretty awful was going on behind the scenes for them. And this is the way that they've decided to stop that pretty awful thing. And so it's their decision and it impacts me. So it's separating out, like, did I have any input into this? Well, you have such a prime example. But there are situations where, I see in my practice where a relationship looks absolutely solid. And then all of a sudden, a client finds that in this solidity, their partner has been having an affair for 3 years and has another family, half an hour down the road.
Ah.
Yeah. Like, how do you fit that into your reality, into your thought process? Like, how could I have not missed? How could I have missed the signs? What was going on? And the first thing is to blame yourself.
Mm. Don't
Most
go
people
there.
go to that place, which is not, you're right, it's not a good place to go. Keep it in perspective, keep it over there, keep it somewhere you can look at it, not live in it,
Hmm.
right?
Right.
Because if you can look at it with perspective, you're not wallowing in it, feeling it all. That'll help you a lot.
And I want to mention, though, we may go through those times, and it's okay just to know that, okay, you're going to blame yourself. Okay, you're going to feel like really hurt. And it's just about kind of being with that and then using these tools, bringing the tools of resiliency. And one of them is this question. And what I love about your question is, for what might this be good? And bring your brain to just even ask that question. The reason is because when you do that, it kind of sets up, being a hypnotherapist, it sets up a new neural pathway option in your brain, a new way to think, a new energy. And even if you forget the question, you've planted the seed in your subconscious mind to start seeking out something good about the situation. And whether it's now you have more time to do something else, you've been freed up in a certain way, emotionally, and it may take time to get there, but for what might this be good is a
Mhm.
great kickstart to the healing process.
Yeah, I agree. And obviously, I agree.
It's yours.
It's mine. But I do think that we feel our feelings, and we're not talking about denial at all. We're not saying, okay, I feel all this, let me think about it differently. But feel the feelings and then say, all right, here's where I sit. What do I want my next best steps to be? And when you take your power back and you ask a question like, for what might this be good? Well, all the examples that you just gave, maybe I could add to those, like, all right, freeing up time. Well, it's also freeing up mental real estate and real estate in your heart, perhaps, that you can now think about things from a different context. Like if you take your example of being 14 and finding you're getting a divorce, well, maybe you start thinking, well, maybe, I'll get a new room and it'll be bigger. Maybe maybe things will be easier and I'll bond with the parent that I live with the most. Whatever you can do at 14, you're not going to be good at that at all. But for those of us who are no longer 14, feel the feelings and then say, all right, how would I like to feel and what will take me in that direction, so that you empower yourself. Now, I can almost hear people listening to us, Laura, saying, oh, there we go again. It all has to come from within. I've got to pull my socks up. I've got to be the one who does it all. Well, you can get some help with that. That's the whole point. Sometimes I call Laura and say, hey, I have no clue how to get out of this rabbit hole. And she'll say, okay, let's talk. Or, and she's quite willing and able and has done the reverse, right? But know that you can reach out. You don't have to do it alone. You can get professional help, from either one of us or somebody that you're familiar with going to. Um, know that you don't have to do it alone, and know that it is an inside job. What you focus on. When I wrote the book, What You Pay Attention to Expands, I really meant it. Like, if I'm going to sit in the ain't it awful and he or she done me wrong place, and I'm going to wallow there for a long, long time, and then I'm going to tell every single person in my life and on Facebook how awful this person is and what they did to me, and it's so terrible, and I'm going to take pictures of myself with no makeup looking awful and saying, feel sorry for me, I'm going to make a meal of it. And if I'm going to do that, then I am getting to stay stuck in it. And that's a choice that you're making. But to empower yourself to say, well, I have choice in this world, what I think about or what I focus on or what I pay attention to. What am I focused on? Am I focused on this should never happen to me? Or am I focused on this happened to me and what am I going to do with it?
Hmm. And there's a huge difference between the two of them, like you were saying, is one is putting you into the victim realm and one is putting you into the responsible, empowered realm. And it may, I like how you put it. It was like, okay, well, yes, we are saying you have to do it is up to you. And you know what? That's the brilliance thing, because you can create what you want. If you leave it up to other people, most likely you're not going to get what you want. And you're going to be always at the effect of something versus causing what you want. So, yes, remember what is good. Remember to reach out. You don't have to go it alone. Feel the feelings and then start taking the steps. That answer for that question is like, well, for what might this be good? And then there might be a next step out of that to take on.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think those are very important things. And when you recognize that you can go in any direction, like here you are sitting on your bed wallowing in self-pity, and then all of a sudden there's a crash in the kitchen, and somebody you love could be hurt. You get out of wallowing in your bed on the pretty quickly, right? So you can turn your mind, you can take yourself, and where you go when you are wallowing is into the past. How long do you want to spend there? Because you're living in the present. Do you want to have your heart and mind and head in the past? That's not going to help. We have to get up to date with what is happening, right? And when we bring ourselves to all right, this happened, what will I do with it? That is a very powerful piece.
And if it's very powerful, what am I going to do with it? Then you have a choice, right? You have the choice to do what choice. And you always have choice.
Mm-hmm.
You always have choice how you respond. I mean, they even talk about that with the Holocaust victims,
Mm-hmm.
how you think about the situation, how you respond to the situation, what you make it mean to you, is, and how you can shift out of it. So and it's okay to feel what you're feeling: bad, sad, hurt, unloved, less than, not worthy. It's okay to feel that. It doesn't mean you have to be a victim to it.
Right. Right.
It doesn't mean, and there may be a very strong habit, like I call them mental muscles, that you have to blaming other people, feeling at the victim. Why always me? Why does this always happen to me? If that's a thought pattern that you have, that's just a thought pattern. It's not the truth. The feeling is underneath that created that pattern. And you can dive deeper and you can transform that by doing some of the steps we've talked about today, especially our magic question that we keep talking about, for what might this be good? Because
Mm-hmm.
that is like a kind of like your lifesaver if you're drowning. It's like, oh, if there's nowhere else you can go, at least reach up to that question.
Mm-hmm. Because you're going to have to assimilate this anyway. So if you keep fighting it and in denial, it's not going to change that your parents are getting a divorce, or the other person has gone off to live with their other family, 30 minutes away. Not going to change. And you can want to um, shadow box all you want with it, not going to change. So are you going to sit in the past and be a result of somebody else's choices, or are you going to say, okay, I felt the feelings, and now for what might this be good, and if I can focus on that, what are my next best steps?
Hmm.
Very
And
important.
you know what? We saw say a lot of depending on yourself for that. It takes your own self. It's going to be your self work, but there's someone holding the life raft too if you need it, or the lifesaver. And that's, someone like you, Roberta, someone like me. We can be there to listen and to steer you in that direction. So it feels a lot easier. So you make a better choice for your power.
Mm-hmm.
And so if you need that, go for it. There's that could be the very next best thing. If you can't get yourself out of that thought pattern, if you can't get yourself to think for what might this be good, then at least look for something that might help. Even search on Google.
Yeah.
Ask Google a question. I call Google my guru because I can ask it anything. It has an answer for everything. It's there 24/7.
And don't believe the answers
I
all the
don't always
time.
believe the answers, but Google's my guru in that sense too, because it helps me be more discerning to, oh, do I believe that? Is that really true? Oh, well, that's a good idea, but let me verify, So um, there's a combination here. Yes, the resiliency is about taking on your own power, is about acknowledging that you have some really interesting creativity and powerful source within you. You do. And you
Mm-hmm.
have resources that you might not even know. And this is, if anything, for what might this be good? It might be for you to know that fact.
Well, I think so. And if we take a metaphor like bouncing on a trampoline, something I've never done, but I've watched, and what I notice with acrobats and gymnasts and things is if you keep bouncing with your legs straight, you keep bouncing and you're at the mercy of the trampoline. But if you come down and you absorb it with your knees, the trampoline stops moving. And this is a good metaphor for what we do. Like, you're reverberating from somebody else's decision for a while, or are you going to bend your knees and say enough? You're going to stop this bouncing around at somebody else's push on the trampoline and say, no, I don't have to do that. I am going to stop it and get off and do something different. And it's important for us to recognize that, you know, um, I was watching America's Got Talent and the champions, and there's three people there that do the Russian board technique, and it's a bouncing board that two men hold, and this woman does all this stuff. And I notice every time she comes, and she is death defying. She does it over fire, over boards of nails, all this kind of thing. And she's a mother of two, and the father is on one end of the board. But the thing is that every time she signals and she goes way up in the air and she does all of these things blindfolded, coming down on fire with a bed of nails underneath her, every time she comes down on the board, she bends her knees and stops the board. And I really noticed
Mhm.
that if she didn't, she'd go right back up, right? But she knows that her job is to bend her knees, stop the board, take the impact, stop the vibration. And we want to stop the vibration of the negative going on in our life. and feel it, acknowledge it, don't deny it, don't get into the blame game. It's all the other person's fault. You were there too. So, you were part of the relationship or whatever. I mean, not in your example
Yeah, I was gonna
of,
say,
of the divorce,
I
but
take
in,
responsibility for my feelings and my reaction to the rug being pulled out, and I say, okay, well, this feeling is not is not to blame them. It's something to deal with and to figure out how can I nurture myself, nourish myself into a better place. And it took me years. Okay, this is
it's
not an overnight
difficult.
thing. Years, decades. Okay, yeah.
Well, that's also a piece of brilliance that you just offered there. You know, I work with people all the time who have not really recognized what their childhood set them up to. And then they come face to face with something that's so painful, and they don't realize that they have been reverberating from childhood in that pattern and using it as their basis. And so that's true for all of us. And so we repeat this pattern when we have something that broadsides us. And so the question is, feel it, and then how long do you want to reverberate? Right? Bend your
And
knees, stop the board, and say, all right, let me look around from this new place. I've been bouncing around now. Where am I? Let me take stock of where I actually am. What's working in my life? How many places in my life are working? Where do I get validation for who I am and what I do, and that people love me and care about me? You start making lists like that, and then this thing starts to go back into its rightful size in the constellation of your life. It's no longer taking over the whole of your life. I've had things that have happened to me, and I've had to say, okay, that's only one part. Right? Things happen to me as a young mom with 3 kids working full time, getting a PhD. I get knocked off my peg often. But I'd have to say, okay, but the kids are safe, the bills are paid, all these things are happening, and this one thing, I can't let it take over everything, otherwise I won't be able to sustain the other parts. So it's really important for us to recognize that resilience is something that we want to have and that we can have. It is a shift in your mindset. Like, ain't it awful and he or she done me wrong? I can hang out there for a while, and then I'm going to take charge of my life. I'm going to empower myself to say, I have choices. I have the opportunity to take a different perception or create different perspectives, and that will be empowering to me. And that's possible.
I had an insight while you were talking about the woman in the board. How long did it take her to learn that
Yeah.
skill, right? A while. So she knew she could get there, or she at least had an inkling of a belief that that would be possible. She had someone showing her the way and guiding her, spotting her along the way. So who's your resiliency team? Think about that. I love the idea of making lists of who supports you, and how can you. One of the other things you said was put this in perspective. How can you right size the situation? Over in the beginning, when the rug is pulled out from you, you're like, "Whoa, that was like unbelievable," and then how over time you get better at right sizing it relatively adeptly. It could take a long time, it could take a short time, but this is something that you have that belief. That you have your team, you have your own set of skills and techniques to, okay, I'm wallowing right now. I get it. I'm not going to stay here, but it's going to be a place that I'm not going to stay for long. I'm going to figure out the next step. So, how will you right size your situation? Is a great place to start thinking about journaling about. Journals can be your friend if you don't trust anybody, if you don't feel like you're ready to talk about it yet.
Mhm.
Crying is one of my best friends when I'm hurt because it's a release
That's right.
and it's a processing, it's a full experience of the feeling, and then it's a release.
Hmm. And crying helps you reoxygenate your system and get the carbon dioxide out that is going to pull you down. And crying is a natural response to being hurt. And people have been taught to suppress crying. that's not helpful. So get back in touch with the ability to respond to life and allow yourself to cry when you're hurt. It's okay, but don't use it as a tool to get sympathy from others. I mean, we're talking about genuine tears.
Right.
In the hijackal world, there are people who are mostly covert narcissists who can turn on tears like you wouldn't believe, and it's a tool, it's a manipulation. But for those of us who have genuine, honest feelings and we are experiencing them, tears are a release. And so it's very important. And as Laura just put there, it's healthy to cry from the depths of your truth. Beautifully said. I'm hurt right now. But notice too, if something happens and you think it should be a really big thing, but like there are no tears. They're not even feeling like tears. You don't even want to cry. It doesn't cross your mind to cry. Maybe it isn't such a big deal.
It might be that. It might be you're not processing it yet. You might have just gone numb. It could be a whole myriad of things. But the whole point is to explore it, to wonder about it, to process it in whatever way that your soul is guiding you. Because your soul will guide you if you pay attention. It's just speaking another language. It's called the language of feelings and emotions versus thoughts and reactions to those emotions.
Mm-hmm.
So, that's why we do this show, to kind of give you another perspective, to help you move through those challenging times, those times when the rug is pulled out from underneath you, and know you're not alone. You got this. On top of it, you have skills, you have people, you have a resiliency team. And if you don't know who that is, you can start with Rhoberta and I. We're happy to be here for you. And so, Rhoberta, people can find you at Transform.
Transformingrelationship.com.
And you can find me at transformtoday.com or laurarubinstein.com or anywhere online. Just or find us at the Transform Your Relationship show, or Transform Your Relationships live Facebook page. We're there too. So we love bringing these topics to you, to go deep, to dive deep, to inspire you to live in your full power and have the support you need in your life. So let us know any questions you might have, and feel free to sprinkle this message around online.
And if you have questions for us and you're watching this in the replay, we have access to the Facebook post. So just put your comments down below and say, what about this? Could you talk about that? What do you feel about this? And we'll note them, and we will certainly put them into a future episode.
Thanks for being here. Thanks, Rhoberta.
Bye-bye, Laura. Thank you.